bright Rumble. And so I'll add us to Rumble. I'm not a huge fan
good idea
of the person behind it, but I know it's a popular platform. So yeah.
Is Isaac sorry, I'm talking too fast. Good idea.
We're live.
Oh, okay. I'll ask you later.
No indoor secrets now. We're live. And I hear you. You got that muted. Okay. Hey guys. Oh, I'm hearing an echo on your end, Bear. Indoor secrets. Check. 1, 2. We're live.
How's my sound?
Yo. Yeah, good. How am I sounding? I need to get a mixing board in here so I know what the hell I sound like. Am I okay?
You're okay. We've got to get you up to my level of technology, though.
We do. But in honor of you, I'm wearing a paisley shirt today.
I was going to say you're looking very paisley today.
In honor of your generation, I'm decided to meet you at your level. And I've been doing a lot of Beatles listening to as I finished the Billy Shears book. And I've been fascinating, kind of obsessed with the Beatles of late. So I'm going to the 1960s vibe today.
You're finally seeing the light. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, man. Dude, that I don't know if you got into that Billy Shears book, the memoirs, but
I love it.
There's some trippy esoteric stuff in there, man.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love to touch more on that sometime, because I think there's some important stuff with music going on there. And with Paul McCartney, he's basically saying when he passes, he's going to drop, or Billy Shepherd or whatever, is going to drop he's going to do the whole kibosh on basically the Beatles narrative. And it'll be interesting to see if he does it. But yeah, it's a fascinating story, fascinating subject. I just absolutely obsessed with it right now. And I've been listening to a lot of the Beatles songs when he came on board after 1966. And there's so many little nuggets in there besides just even like the reverse, playback and stuff. So anyways, Paisley for Dr. Lando and your great generation.
Thank you. My great generation, it is mostly asleep at home right now, watching television, suffering the consequences of the get your roll up your sleever.
Yes, and enjoying the new, what are we calling it? The 57. What was the
57? Now the 7th letter of the alphabet. Of course, everybody can figure that out, and you put 5 in front of it, because that is in the new logarithms that are already activated for anybody that talks about 57, will, be considered naughty by the robots. And as you're aware, yesterday we had a nationwide rollout of 57. And so let the games begin.
Check. Sorry, I was checking on YouTube here. So yes, and of course we have our great champion of peace, our executive in the office here, Mr. Biden, of course, saying be prepared for more outbreaks. So interesting that kind of all coalesce, or that's all kind of coming together right now. So yeah, why it's more important than ever to understand transmutation, right? Which we'll maybe talk a little bit about today, and understanding what the waveforms are and how they work, and how all of this stuff can be, it can be subverted a bit, but in the end, we do need mass societal awakening and change, because beyond the 57, special 57 sauce, we've also got these insane satellites going up, or balloons, or whatever you want to call it, they're putting up, and they're now, I guess, hundreds of thousands are planned to be put up there, whatever they are. People are seeing them in the sky. They're lighting up the sky, making it brighter, and also, of course, affecting our biology, our spirituality, our ability to connect to the higher realms. So in order to stop this stuff, there's only so much transmutation we can be doing. We need societal change. We need technological change. We need people to wake up and stop using this stuff, which is hard to do because I was literally talking to some off-gridders and they're doing podcasts and stuff, and they're using this technology to get the information out that they're talking about. So we're in a weird time right now where it's kind of like, I mean, you're on satellite internet right now as we speak. So yeah, we got to get the technology figured out and better and not so harmful, and get these corporations, out of here too. So a lot to do, but I'm positive we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. And I don't know if it means anything, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mike? Okay. Yeah. I just, I had to switch modems there because I was a little unstable. So I lost you for a minute. Yeah. And it just so happens that NASA is the #1 procurer in the world of helium gas. I don't know if that connects any dots for anybody, but just saying.
Okay, I'm going to hit record. We're going to start the official podcast. These are all the little nuggets people get for coming on the live stream here. So I'm going to hit record. We've got a great one today. Let me hit record and I'll introduce it because this is our bread and butter. This is an amazing way to start the new year. And boom, we're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the beautiful Smith River up here in the great state of Jefferson. It is 2022. Can you believe it? Happy New Year's to y'all. We want to give a huge shout out to our community and all the support we've been getting from you guys. It's just been such an amazing time to see all your beautiful faces in person as we've had people visiting from the co-op. We had a nice little Christmas get together. We had a New Year's get together. I had a little New Year's Eve shindig at our place and got to see some music and Sky Peeps and some Alfa Vedic co-op members coming together and like being in person and engaging in our physical fields and smiling and hugging. It's just been an incredible time seeing this community grow. So thank you guys. Thank you to our Telegram admins, our Discord admins. Thank you to everybody who supports us. We are so grateful for you and believing in us and our message and our mission to basically evolve out of the dark. What would you call it, Bear? The reductionist materialist model. And
the Maya.
The Maya, yes. And so anyways, guys, we have a special in-house chat today to start the new year. I can't think of a more fitting topic to jump right into because it is time. It is time we start moving towards the new way of thinking about how we heal, of what disease actually is or dis-ease, or what it isn't really. And also this relates to everything, how we grow our food, how we do commerce, how we relate to each other as infinite soul spirit beings. So this is all extremely important, powerful information, and I'm very excited to get into it. If you are new to Alfa Vedic, please, people keep asking, Bear, how can we support you guys? You can support us through a number of ways. As you notice, we don't do ads on our podcast. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. We've been offered by many people, big companies too, to do ads. We don't do it. We have a what would you call it? A self-reliant model of monetizing us through our own.
It's permaculture. It's full circle permaculture. You know, we live off grid. We grow stuff. We make stuff out of what we grow. We make very high level things out of it. We pass that on to our customers and they get value out of it. And then in turn, give us funny money that allows us to grow more stuff the next year. And permaculture models that I see out there that are working are largely missing the commercial arm and then asking for handouts. And, you know, we all need money, but what we're trying to do is do a full circle operation here.
Yeah, there's nothing more ironic than a permaculture operation trying to get government grants. It's just like, what are you doing? Anyways, thank you guys to support us. You can go to our website, alfavedic.com. It's ALFAVEDIC.com. And you can join our co-op. We are still using Patreon. We are this year, I promise, very soon, moving to our own platform. We will be off Patreon. It'll be all integrated in alfavedic.com, but you can support us there. You can also support us by buying our products and support your own health. or your neighbors or your friends. I gifted a bunch of our teas for Christmas to neighbors around here, and they're blown away by our teas. And I'll be the first to say our teas are the best in the world. So go ahead and look. And now I know if you're out of the United States, we're working on that too. Hopefully getting Canada dialed, to be able to ship to Canada with our down south partners who's a family member here who hopefully can help us out there. So that's how you can support us, and we will continue to put out this content every week. We've got amazing podcasts coming to you this year, really mind-blowing guests and mind-blowing topics. We're going to do more in-house discussions like this as well. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing y'all in Austin too for the Greater Reset in a few weeks. So anybody coming out to there, that's going to be fun. And Bear Lando is doing a ton of interviews. You were just on a really cool show a couple days ago, Bear. I really enjoyed that guy. I wasn't aware of him. We want to give a plug on that real quick.
Right, Robert Scott Bell. Yeah, great new family member. And you know what? He has a tech guy that, is always down in the corner of the screen that, does, because they're a real pro operation. They really are. And he's in Chicago, but guess where the tech guy is?
He's in Southern Oregon.
No? Klamath.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Klamath. No way. What a trip.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll have.
So he's going to come by the farm and see us.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
But we're like old best friends now. Both Robert and him, Scott.
Yeah, I actually
Kevin.
I sent that show to my father because I was like, oh, that's right up his alley. But yeah, that's a daily show that he does, and he's really uncovering all the fraud with the allopathic model and stuff we talk about. So check him out. And yeah, Bear, I know you're getting lined up for a bunch of podcasts. I am as well. It's great. We're getting out there. We're getting the information out there. Super important. So, but today, maybe one of the most important topics we've covered so far, as we're finally moving into the things we initially discussed like year one when we started this podcast. As we said, we teased we'll be getting into, and we got a little sidetracked by the 57 special sauce and the jibby jabby juby, but it's what it is. And so we're going back to this because this is where we all need to be going. The prevailing climate of contagion-fear has placed the germ theory versus bioterrain debate center stage. By the way, too, we had a great talk with Cowan and Andy Kaufman, Alex Zeck and I did during the event. If you didn't catch that, we pretty much put the germ theory to rest, to sleep. Those guys did an incredible job countering like the very popular mainstream, debate topics that the germ theorists come at with in terms of the virus. From the lab stuff to transference to mRNA stuff to all that, and did an amazing job. So if you guys want to check that out, go ahead, Bear.
And Marcy and Andy's, feature film Terrain coming to a theater near you soon.
Yes, which we previewed a bit on the event, and it was actually, what was interesting with the event, the number one hits on the event were all terrain based. It was you. It was the Andy and Tom discussion. It was Melissa Sell was one of the most popular ones. Kelly Brogan, who is a hardliner on that, and the terrain film. And even Sayer G, he's all about it too. And he's in the film, you're in the film, Kelly, Tom, Andy, and shout out to Andy Kaufman for all he's doing. He's got his True Medicine University project that's now just starting. It's launching this weekend with a special on cymatics, which we'll probably cover a little bit today in our topic. It extremely
We're gonna cover a lot. Cover a lot on that today and relate it to bioterrain. And love Andy and really respect what he's doing out there. He's really stuck his neck out, and he's changed a lot of minds for the better. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad he's on our side.
Yeah, for sure. I'd hate to argue with him.
Yeah. Well, so unfortunately, the discussion has not evolved beyond a myopic fixation on our microbial echo partners. Nature does not create pathogens or disease. On this episode, we dissect bioterrain concepts from on-the-ground biology to the cellular-ether interface to once and for all put the disease deception to rest. The comprehensive overview will draw on germ theory origins, the re-emerging alchemical sciences, the logical fallacies of scientism, etherian physics, and Dr. Lando's 40 years of clinical experience as a bioterrain physician. And in future episodes, we'll break each component down further. but this overview serves as a necessary preface. Our times demand a great awareness to pierce the veils of deception and face our responsibility to future generations. We are in an information war, and the truth will indeed set us free. So with that being said, Dr. Lando, where do we start?
I don't know. In a pre-show, as I already mentioned, you're looking very paisley today. So good to be with you as always. And glad to see you're getting with the times.
Peace, brother. Yes, I'm wearing my paisley shirt in honor of the 60s generation and all that they did to bring us so many great music acts that were probably run by the Tavistock Institute. But I've just been, we were talking before we hit record, how much I've been into the Billy Shepherd, Paul is Dead conspiracy. So I've been listening to a lot of Beatles, and I just felt compelled to wear my paisley shirt today. So in honor of the 60s generation and how close they got to really cracking open some holes there, and with some social revolution. And now what we're seeing in Kazakhstan overnight, who knows? Maybe the revolution is starting again.
It absolutely is. I don't think it ever went away myself. Okay, so where do we begin today? This is a large topic, and interestingly, bioterrain medicine is what I happen to do quietly behind the scenes, and you had to do it quietly because it gets results, and when you get results, certain people don't like it, and doctors end up actually dying for it. At worst, and at best, they close up your shop and you never work again. So, I just learned from the best in the world, from people overseas that were carrying on the long tradition of bioterrain medicine from its origins that started with, the precepts put forth by Beauchamp and Enderlein and then the usurpers, the Faucis of the day, Pasteur, those folks, of course, came and plagiarized and twisted everything around to create fallacies that would then serve the special interest of the folks that are now bringing us the roll up your sleever. And, what we need to have is a little bit of a historical reference. That's why you and Mike, a long time ago, you and I, started out with bioterrain, largely talked about it, and little did we know that all of a sudden it would be the topic of the day in front and center in the whole germ theory debate. As the controllers are wont to do, they try to keep you in a very confined discussion. And the discussion has now become centered around a fictitious microbe, whether or not it's causing disease, what we have to do about it. And then the folks on the no sleever side are saying, well, we think it's a bunch of hokum. And we really need to understand that germs do not create disease, which I agree wholeheartedly with. And my 4 years of experience and what I learned from other folks before me is that is absolutely true. In fact, when you learn the facts, it's just crazy insanity that you have to be real stupid to believe. Not calling everybody stupid, but they just have a lack of information. When you get a little bit of information, then you can see right through it. So it's like the political right-left sort of thing. Everybody's arguing Republican, Democrat. Now we're talking about germ theory versus non-germ theory, or what we loosely call bioterrain. Now we have to expand that discussion beyond that dichotomy, because right now, as the folks, we'll call them the boys down under there, or the boys from downstairs, what they are very clever at doing is infiltrating both sides. And whenever you hear somebody out there really seeming like they're saying some good things, but then they start talking about the virus or virome and things like that, you need to, have your spidey senses on high alert. Now, I'm not calling all them out and saying, they're infiltrators, but there's a few well-known ones out there that people love that I know for a fact they are infiltrators. And so we need to get out of that right-left discussion and get a lot larger. And that brings me into bioterrain medicine, which is not just about microbes. And what I did is on the fly last night, I hope it works because there's a lot of material to cover. I created a little presentation in between dinner and season 2 of Narcos and giving away all my secrets here. And what I did is
how dare you support Hollywood, Bear Lando?
Well, how dare we support, YouTube as well? And, while we're on that subject, here's the deal. We're using them. We're infiltrating them. So if we have to talk in some codes just to evade the logarithms and stay on there and use their medium to get our message out a little longer, so what? I mean, we could take ourselves off tomorrow. Is it really going to change anything? No. We'll create a lot more change if we use them. That inevitable day, that we'll see ourselves removed, that's fine, but in the meantime, we've infiltrated them. It's a play right out of their own playbook.
And we also play the important role of taking in those who we're talking about control. I hate the word controlled op, but these infiltrators, right, who do speak 90, maybe 85, 90% truth. And there are people that they do wake up. I'm sorry, but I know a lot of people that Alex Jones heavily affected back in the day. And then they realized that 10%, 15% of his BS is terrible and leads you into fear and negativity and war mindset and all this stuff. But then they come to us, or they come to the Marty Leeds of the worlds, or they come to the Kelly Brogans, they come to the Amanda Volmers, etc. And then we are still on these platforms, and then we're able to, bring them to the righteous truth, or whatever you want to call it, the true law. And so they do play a role, but because we're in a duality matrix, we are able to kind of balance that out a bit with what we're doing. And by being on the whatever you want to call this platform, this controlled YouTube platform, we are able to bring them in. And then as Chordal's launching QDN, I think this weekend, the Chordal Data Network, round 1, eventually will be completely decentralized, and they won't be able to stop us. So I think it's good, though, we're staying underground, Bear, because it's allowing us to bring them in without us getting too heavily censored. So I've also heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that there are some, I hate to say the word white hats, but there are some people that are working within the realm, certain technological frameworks here to keep certain channels up. Now, that could be total hopium, but it is interesting that we were kicked off YouTube, and then I sent a nice email just basically calling them out and saying that we don't, do this and this and this, of what they said, and they reinstated us, and we haven't gotten a thing next. And we're definitely not controlled op, guys. I guarantee we're not with secret boardroom meetings in the CIA. So it is interesting what's going on right now with YouTube, and that we're still on here.
I think you just flat out intimidated them myself. While you mention, you're a very intimidating individual, Michael. So while we're on it, you mentioned Marty Leeds. I just happen to have a copy of his new book here for you, Michael.
Oh, sweet. Oh, that's great. And he's self-publishing those himself and printing those himself, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing book. I followed him for a long time. I've read all his books. Now, this is a refinement of everything he's put out before, and I'd highly recommend it. I'm well into it and really enjoying it. He was gracious enough to send us 2 copies, one for you. So next time I see you, I'll give you yours. And thanks, Marty. We love you, and great work. You're one of the good ones for sure. Okay, so let's get into it. Mike, you have to show me how to share a screen.
Oh, let me just give you access. So you should be able to share now.
Okay.
Marty, I love you, man. If sometimes he hops in the chat here, he is going to be coming to Music and Sky this year. We got to finalize the date, hopefully this week. He was supposed to be last year, and something came up with his well and his new property. But if you guys want to meet Marty Leeds live and in person, Music and Sky, and also Bear Lando, You're slated to be one of the headlining talks one day. So
Who am I going this year?
you're going, man. I want to see you in an ice bath.
Okay.
Okay, can you share?
All righty. Share screen.
Okay.
Let's see. Desktop. I guess that's the one. Share. Open. Oh, come on, man.
Make sure you have all
Zoom.
your NASA propaganda secret letters and stuff off your screen.
Yeah. Oh man. This is so confusing, Michael. Now it's brought me up to system preferences. All right, let's try that again.
Okay. And
desktop share.
Any excuse me, any presentation materials I will put on our website and link in the show notes below, so you guys can reference this. Is this a PDF or is this like a full-on PowerPoint presentation?
PDF.
Okay.
So I just keep getting open system preferences.
Yeah, you should be able to hit meeting, start share, and then select your desktop or your screen. If I've got multiple screens, so it makes me do that. And then you should be able to just share your screen.
Yeah, we've done this before.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our audience is enjoying this right now.
Hey, this is why I wear the Paisley shirt. I know you didn't
Yeah.
have share screen in your heyday.
We didn't have screens.
Oh man, what a blessed time. I think I mentioned this on a previous Alpha Cast, but I was watching the Get Back, speaking of the Beatles again, watching that Get Back documentary on the Disney crap channel. And I was just so blown away by when they go to live coverage, when they're playing on the rooftop, of people just without their phones recording. And, you know, it's just so mind-boggling to think of a time when everyone just didn't jump to their phone to have to record something for something they'll never share or probably look at again. You know, it's just, we live in interesting times.
We do. Okay, help me out here, please. I've got system preferences. I've got accessibility, full disk access. No, I don't want that. Screen recording, is that it?
You should be able to just go up to meeting and hit start share, and then now it's opening up what is it, opening up a preferences?
Yeah, let's see if I can get something up here. Meeting. I was doing the icon below.
Yeah, go up to your top, hit meeting, then hit start share.
There we go. And desktop share. And now it's getting me open system preferences again. Or cancel.
Yeah, I hit cancel. See if that just lets you do it.
Yeah, already tried that.
Well, worst case scenario, Bear, if you want to just quickly shoot me via email the doc, I can more than happy to share on my end.
I'll do that.
Sorry,
and
guys.
in the meantime, today
this shows how much prep we do. You know, I will say this, guys, we're so busy. We're on almost every single Alpha Cast we do. We're just on the fly. Like we don't do a lot of prep. So but Bear, you put effort into this and you prepped this and made this doc. So I want to show our listeners.
Now I think it's very necessary. And I'll be with you in a second.
Okay. Yeah. So anyways, in terms of just for people that are curious about Music in Sky, I might as well take this time to hype it. We are finalizing the location. It will be in Northern California. It will be on a river, and there will be a redwood grove involved with camping and workshops. We are expanding out the children's section. The children's stage will be a huge priority for us. The Luminary Village for the children's camp, working with Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, and making it even more family friendly, evolving the artist, the whole art gallery, which is a huge feature. And also, of course, being on a river, we'll be able to do a lot of water activities. and it's more open in terms of space for RVs and trailers this go around. So we should be able to accommodate more of those, even though we do prefer, if you do tent camp, it's just better for the ecological footprint. And I'm not talking carbon credits here. I'm just talking wear and tear on the land. Pulling in trailers and RVs is typically more wear and tear, but hypocritical me, I'm the one that pulls my trailer in. But yeah, we're looking probably in June. We're trying to lock down the dates ASAP. So go to musicandsky.com for more information on that. And also, we're launching all of our media on the Be Sovereign app, Sayer G's app. It is on there. We're just finalizing. We're going to get year one content up there from the Joshua Tree event, and have a little subscription model you guys can opt in on. And we will be having a professional film crew filming this year too. So those who can't make it will be able to engage with the content that way through the Be Sovereign network, which check out. Sayer G's put a lot of work into that. And eventually we will be routing that through Toroidal. So check out the Be Sovereign. How you doing down there, Bear? Were you able to?
You should have it in a second.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, guys. Great to see in the chat. We've got, Interverse is in. That's great. I was just on. Okay, is it coming in here right now? I was just on last night on a really fun little spur of the moment live chat with. Let's see, is it coming up here? With that crew. And I'm looking forward to jumping on board with that podcast. Let's see, where is this? Now all technology is failing. Oh, here we go. Okay. Boom. Oh, we got a full-on presentation here, guys. Okay, so I'm going to hit share right now. And thanks for bearing with us here, guys. We apologize. But the show must go on. Okay, start share.
Yeah, I've never had that problem with sharing before.
It's okay. Okay, can you see this?
I can see it.
Okay, great. How's that look?
Perfect.
Next slide.
Yeah, so we decided to call it the disease deception because, during this whole Bioterrain Germ Theory debate, everybody's always asking, well, what does make you sick then if it's not germs? So again, we beat the germ theory to death, and other people have given us more than good help in doing that. And so what we need now is an overall or an overview of what the Bioterrain really is. And to do that, we have to understand the entire biological energy continuum. Now, this has great practicality because, what I did in my practice for years is I was able to discern which level of that continuum to address at any particular time, because there's no preset recipe or sequence. And we had ways to, interject different modalities and therapies at whatever level we needed to do to make the change to help people restore harmony in their body. So the first thing we have up there is human ecology functions as a capacitor within the creator's flawless design. Now, a capacitor, as most of us know, is an electronic component that receives and stores energy. And the whole name of the game in health and also in our spiritual evolution is the conservation of energy, not thinking of energy in a limited fashion because it's not, but then storing it within our own temple, our own body, so that then we could raise that energy into greater realms of perception. And interestingly, not only do other good things happen on those other levels, and you get great insights and changes in your life, but also your body becomes very healthy in the process. So the first statement I have up there is pathogens and disease do not exist within the natural order. And I'm convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt of this, not just because it's what all of the great ones before us, the scriptures, alchemy, which is complete science, not just the materialistic side of the scientific equation, and what my practical application of these principles in clinical medicine proved to me. But, all these things, brought me to a point in my life where there is no doubt as far as pathogens and disease are not entities that we think of them when we're studying pathology in medical school and all that kind of garbage. When I was in medical school, we had books that were 6 inches thick with every disease, a taxonomy of all these diseases. And if they were created by microbes, and the large majority were attributed to idiopathic. Idiopathic, of course, means we're clueless. We don't know what the hell's going on here. So
literally
what
idiot.
we're gonna
idiopathic.
Yeah. And then of course they keep coming up with some deterministic theory to prove that we're not a victim of microbes and we're a victim of genetics or some such thing. So our second point, symptoms.
Well, can I say one thing? Can I say one thing,
Sure.
Bear? So yeah, pathogens and disease do not exist within the natural order, but I would say parasites do, correct? And some people, when they bring up questions about this, they confuse that, the parasite versus the pathogen.
Well, if parasites exist, which they do, I see them under the microscope, so I can't deny their existence. And I also see their effects in people's bodies. But are they a necessary element within the natural order? Absolutely, they are. So what happens when you, create an environmental condition where there is a void and the normal checks and balances are no longer operative? Then what happens is certain microorganisms fill that void. They take over the machinery and they do things that don't feel good. For instance, years back, there was a woman who created a little electronic device called a zapper, and it did target parasites. And it was a fact that a lot of people, and as is today, have a lot of parasites that are taking too much energy, too many resources away from their biology. And that's because their ecology is out of balance. So now enter the, what do we call it? The building 7 bug there. And, everybody is saying, well, there's natural ways, rather than get the roll up your sleever. And so let's take horse dewormer. And just like this woman found with her little zapper long ago, when you target those parasites, just like horse dewormer does, then the parasites are brought into more of a, less voracious effect within your body. And then you feel better, and it actually helps you get better from a lot of things. It is, in the case of contemporary circumstances, it's not at all fighting a bug. It is making available more resources so that your body can feel better. And she found the same thing, back in that day. However, when you take the horse dewormer, you're doing very unnatural things to your gut biome at the same time and setting yourself up for many more long-term issues. So if you really want to go after parasites, then you should do it electronically with the zapper rather than going after it with harsh drugs and, then getting part of, into that narrative once again, well, there is a bug and we have different ways to treat it. Well, there is no bug, and understand why these alternative treatments really do work. And we're going to give you some more examples of that today. Okay, so we want to look at the fact that there are 5 primary factors that cause what we think of as disease, which doesn't exist. We also want to look at the biological etheric interface. We're going to go through the 12-phase coherence field. and how we create that within our own bodies as they step down from the larger coherence fields from above our head in the firmament. Then the biological alchemy will introduce some alchemical principles and how that all these things figure into the three components of our body, or the three components that I isolate in my spagyrics lab, which are the soul, the spirit, and the body, or what we used to call the sulfur, the mercury, and the salt. And that will all, really, hopefully by the end of today, at least give an overview of how all these things are pulled together, and that we can, in fact, apply this to clinical science. And then we're going to end up with a threefold solution. And just to reiterate, this overview today is going to be broken up into many separate podcasts, because each of these subjects could be several podcasts in and of their own. But what we want to do today is, again, just give a bird's eye view. So our objectives today, we're going to expand bioterrain concepts into the full bioenergy continuum. We're going to expose the pathogen disease deception. And also, let's open up a dialogue about what medical training should be and how we could possibly rethink criteria for entrance into that kind of medical training in the first place. Most of the people that go into medical school are high demand is placed on your analytical left brain side, and it's such a stress just getting through all the pre-med stuff, which I had to do, and you're just obsessed with getting grades. And so by the time you get to medical school, you are pretty much convinced already that you're let's just say indoctrinated into stick figure science, and that these human bodies are a conglomeration of magic BBs held together by these invisible bonds. And then we are constantly searching within that material that we think is the creation of energy, rather than the other way around. And if you look at in a dictionary over, at science, which you're really going to see as bass backwards, it's insane what we're doing. And it's also insane that very intelligent, learned people that become medical doctors can be indoctrinated and hypnotized in such a way. But we need gatekeepers, to keep big pharma going, and that's their role. Okay, let's go next slide. So the origins of disease, let's develop this a little bit more. We talked about 5 particular elements. So we've got the inorganic element deficiency, or what we'll call the 12 builders. We've got the organic elements, and any disruption in the conjugation of organic matter into the matrix of living cells under the direction from inorganic elements, number 1, then you're going to have problems, you're going to have symptoms, and then, our genius doctors are going to diagnose you with a disease. And you're going to notice that these 4 last areas are all dependent on the first, which is none of them can successfully be treated or understood and brought into balance unless you take care of the 12 builders first. Think of it this way. In any trade, somebody who's into carpentry, electronics, anything you can think of, they understand that if they are building something, they need the materials that it takes to build whatever they're building. With the cells, it is absolutely no different. If you know the 12 elements that the cells need, then you will understand how they not only provide the resonance to create the geometry necessary for the precipitation of form and function in our biology, but then they, through that resonance, also direct all of these other things so that they can work. So the organic elements, we'll talk about those second in our presentation. The elementals, I just borrowed a term more from metaphysics because there's a lot of things out there that we can't quite see with our eyes, and we could give a lot of examples of those. But the elementals, which we call those microbes that people didn't even though existed at one time. Now you look under the, the magnification of a microscope and you say, oh, wow, there's a lot of little creatures there. And they actually happen to be pretty smart, and they actually happen to be following your every wish and demand. And so that's why when I worked with patients in the past, I tried to impress upon people, and looking at one drop of their blood, that there's a whole universe in there of intelligent beings that are taking your directives. So why don't you become an intelligent, benevolent, conscious creator in your own universe? So the other thing that can really alter our internal ecology and affect these elementals is if we are poisoned. And there's no lack of that going on these days. We'll talk about that in number 5. Number 4 is the biological psyche interface. Emotions have everything to do with everything, because when we get into concepts of Russellian physics in a minute, and don't let the jargon scare you off, because we're going to really try to create some analogies and examples here so that, we take it out of the technical into a very easy to understand format. When we go into Russellian physics, or what we would call alchemical principles of the ether, then we can really understand how emotions play an important role as far as giving the intensity to those original electrical vectors created by our thought that allow them to pop into the matrix of our biology and into our entire world. And in emotions, we have, New Germanic medicine, which is an amazing science. And with that, I would add a few other things that I found in clinic that were really necessary in order to dissect let's just say, conflict within the psyche, as we talk about in New German medicine, and really give people more of a fighting chance of dissipating that, so the biological expression of that conflict in the psyche would go away, so you aren't left with lingering chronic degenerative disease that can actually become quite dangerous and, of course, be diagnosed as a terminal disease. Contamination, the last one, electromagnetic, biochemical, and mental emotional toxicity. So we just had the launch of the 57, as we were talking about. Stand by, because you're going to get a lot more cases from here on with the bug that everybody's afraid of. Biochemical, of course, they're genetically modifying our food and spraying it with all sorts of things. Some of those things in my childhood, like malathion, that created what was then attributed to a polio epidemic. There's reasons why a whole bunch of people get the same thing at the same time. It's not because of bugs. The bugs are circumstantially blamed because they're at the scene of the crime, trying to fix the mess that we created in the first place. And then we come out with more harsh chemicals in order to kill them. Not a good idea. And mental and emotional toxicity, we'll get into that more. Okay, how are we doing, Mike? You can go to the next slide.
Okay, this page is a lot right here, by the way. This is, take a screenshot of this, guys. This is really a great overview. Real quick, ecobiont, Pop. What do you mean by ecobiont? That's a term I've heard you say before. But
and ecobiont is a microbe that is a friendly worker within our personal ecology, our personal biology. So rather than think of germs as pathogens, bad guys that we need to kill or sterilize by washing our hands, 20 times a day, they are our partners. And without them, we would be in a whole heap of trouble. If you consider that every square centimeter of the outside of your body, every surface within interstitially within the tissues and linings of organs is teeming with microorganisms, probably about 10,000 to 1 is relative to the trillions of cells in your body. We are a living petri dish of microorganisms, and isn't it ironic that we're freaked out by them right now?
Yeah, that's a great analogy for the state of humanity right now.
Okay, so now we're going to start breaking down everything page by page of what we're talking about on, that first little 5 points. Cell salts deficiency. Cell salts we make a big thing out of because they are preparations of the 12 resonant fields that come down from the constellations above us. There is a grand design to our realm, and we're going to be talking more about what that really means in a lot of shows coming up this year. Our realm has resonant fields that are actually beamed down on us. They include the sun, the moon, the constellations. When we talk about astrology, we're not going into horoscope reading. What we are doing is entertaining it as a very real science. If you go into cymatics, as we've already mentioned today, cymatics is simply like what the Native Americans would do. They would stretch a buckskin, put some sand on it, and they would play some music and watch geometrical forms, coalesce on the buckskin. The Tibetans did the same thing. They understood that those resonances that they could isolate would always, every time, create a specific geometry. So these 12 constellations we'll talk about are the ones that create the 12 component spectrum that creates all of life in our realm, and our biological temples are nothing more than a step down of that. And these 12 cell salts are like the little elements or inorganic elements or combinations of things like potassium sulfate and so forth, that then are able to be capacitors for those larger resonances that are beamed down, and not from solid planets, but from plasma fields, much different than what we're taught by NASA with their CGI pictures. But then these resonances then we incorporate into our body, but we can only do that if these 12 cell salts are available in abundance in the bloodstream at all times. Now, when we eat good minerals that have been already chelated, that means conjugated with amino acids so that our body can use them, minerals that we call fulvic and humic, or what they call shilajit, when they collect it in India out of the rocks in the Himalayas. Those are great. Those can be utilized. They are bioavailable. We have those things available ourselves in our product line because they're very necessary. However, when your cells have been tampered with by all the things that they're subjected to these days, the membranes, if they are really membranes the way we're taught in physiology, that's another story. But, things have a difficult time getting within the interior of the cells. There are accretions that block that as well. So what we do is we take the 12 cell salts, again, that represent the 12 component spectrum. And the reason why I had a picture of Rudolf Steiner on the prior slide there is because he used to talk about the 12 component spectrum of our senses, which are what we really should be using predominantly instead of our 5 physical senses, which are just allowing us to see after effects of these resonant fields in the first place that will not teach you how things really got here in the first place. So these 12 salts will then, working in unison, create all of the form and function through resonant-based geometry within our physical system. If they are missing, then you will have symptoms. So let's just read through this. I forget what I even wrote here. Cells can only utilize the constituents from which they are made, and anything else will be selectively rejected. Okay, let's just say we've got some symptoms, and I decide it would be a great idea to take some horse dewormer. Well, what's going to happen with the cells? They're going to absolutely reject that. It's a foreign substance. They can't build a thing out of it, and they're just going to get rid of it. However, it will override certain areas of physiology. It will poison certain things, but at great long-term expense. That's something that people really need to get their minds around these days.
I mean, that is allopathy to a T right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And all disease is caused by a lack. So the inorganic elements provide the resonant induced geometry to create the unique characteristics of every bodily tissue, period. If any of the 12 cell salts are deficient within the blood, both structure and function will be compromised. Deficiencies alert with typical unpleasant sensory feedback as an opportunity for early onset correction. Any diagnosis of disease can only obfuscate what would otherwise be obvious, while further complicating physiology with the escalation of mental emotional trauma. How are we doing, Mike?
This slide right here is like probably easily 2 alpha casts. I know we could probably talk about this for hours on end. I'm in my mind spinning right now when we're talking about cells, and well, we probably don't even really know what cells are. Tom Cowan's talked about this a bunch, and the membrane and the idea of cymatics, how it needs a membrane to bounce off, and how structured water probably plays with sound, and how this works with the cell salts, and how the biology is actually interfacing with our higher consciousness. And well, I mean, you could just spin off.
We're going to go into all that.
Okay.
That's part of our overview today.
Oh,
you're stealing my thunder here.
Real quick question, Bear Lando. Mm-hmm. So, and maybe this is also what we're going to get into, but what besides, like you mentioned, Shilajit, so the 12 cell salts, these are naturally in all foods and in everything, or back in the day, and now they've been kind of stripped out because of modern agriculture, or what are the best ways to ensure that you have these 12 cell salts in your bloodstream? And are we going to get into that in a bit, or is that a good question to ask right now?
No, that's a good question right now. And in fact, I didn't finish one of my earlier thoughts. Cell salts are homeopathically attenuated into the 6, 12, or 30 times dilution. And here's the thing with cell salts. Even though we're talking about homeopathic preparation, it's totally different than homeopathic. It's totally different than herbology, because every herb and every homeopathic remedy contains a resonance that is in fact based on a proportionate formula of these 12 builders. And one of the things I am doing in my laboratory work is when I take a spagyric remedy, I, separate all the 3 parts. One of the parts is the salt. Now you can make the salt out of the soul or the spirit element as well. That's another whole involved discussion we'll talk about. But the salts are the leftover plant matter that have the inorganic elements. Now you can fire those and do all sorts of things. So those elements will never break down. And those elements are what's in conjugated plant matter that then we can use. However, because I started to say our cells have been exposed to so many things and under so much stress, there's a hard time even digesting that stuff and getting into us in the first place. So what Dr. Schussler, who that's his picture we're looking at here, what he did is he created a homeopathic attenuation. And now in that dilution, the elements are still there, unlike homeopathic remedies that are doing more of those larger resonant patterns from other organic matter in the plant or the mineral. This is actually even smaller waveform particulates of the same inorganic material. It never breaks down no matter how small it gets. And these are able to get into the bloodstream and enter directly, bypass the digestion and all the, the cellular transport and everything. And by the way, I am really moved a long time ago away from the phospholipid cellular membrane model. And that's a really cool discussion when you understand how cells really work.
Wow.
All right. Okay. So
next slide.
That's why the cell salts are different. They're in an even more diluted size so that they can get in and bypass all the accretions and the obstacles that have been placed in the cellular pathway by way of contemporary lifestyle and contamination. Mm-hmm. And microwave technologies in the 57 are the worst offenders.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. And do we plan on doing more advanced products too through Alfa Vedic that will be engaging in these cell salts through other means?
Oh, absolutely. Let's just say one of our things that we grow here, let's just say Jiaogulan. Now, say I make a specific formula out of it, and I, separate the three components: the sulfur, the mercury, which is the alcohol, the essence, and the leftover salts. And then I put them through great purification processes and then combine them. What it is, it's the ascension process. And alchemy, you have to understand, was not just a very evidence-based laboratory science, but it was in fact considered a sacred spiritual practice for the alchemist. Because when you unify your own resonance through your consciousness with those laboratory procedures, you are duplicating the ascension process that we are all going through. We go through many experiences. Each of those experiences put us through a purification process. Someday we connect the dots, put ourselves back together in an elevated form. And, in that particular situation, the energy is flowing through the central column. Different events happen in our brain chemistry. Different parts of our neurology are expanded that were previously dormanted through neuroendocrine secretions that are now flowing, whereas they weren't before. Our bandwidth of perception, is increased, and now we're seeing through the whole enchilada, and a lot of us are starting to get glimpses of that already. So we know it's not just BS. Okay, so those things in the lab, I will, for instance, isolate in Jiaogulan the salts, which is now a particular proportion of these organic cell salts, which is the secret formula that makes Jiaogulan work in the first place. So now we take the cell salts and not just put them all back, not cell salts, but the plant salts back into a whole spagyric formula that works brilliantly. But we're going to save some of those and make homeopathic attenuations of it, so you can get the Jiaogulan formula that makes it work on the level of cell salts. And it's going to take the practice of cell salts into a merging of alchemy and so forth. And we're going to get more into that a little bit in a few slides.
Wonderful. And I would just say, you mentioned ascension, and that can trigger some folks. Would you say the New Age movement kind of co-opted that term and manipulated and flipped it and made it really what it's not?
Well, as above, so below. And if anybody gets triggered by that, I would say, I would agree with what you just asked. But, Mike, go down to the river today in the morning hours, when the sun's starting to warm things up, and you'll see mist rising from the river. You'll see it kind of evaporate into the upper atmosphere. Some clouds coalesce, and then it comes back down. That's the alchemical process, and you're watching ascension in action. So why would our personal biology at any level be different than the way the whole frickin' thing works in the first place? That is a schizophrenic way of thinking, to think that we, our operations are any different than the whole natural order. Only we have a consciousness that is, of course, an individualization of the creator, the way the creator expands the overall universal awareness. And, it's our responsibility to do that in the first place, and not just, be part of lesser areas of the natural order that cannot do that consciously, but assist us nevertheless in the process.
Yeah, fascinating. And it is interesting that we ascend up and we understand the plane of existence that we're actually on as we ascend up towards the heavenly waters. That makes a lot more sense than being on some sort of ball, rotating. When you start to look at the true physics of the realm, all of this stuff starts to make a lot more sense than the nonsense that we've been told. So
the primary axiom of conventional science is shit happens. That's it. It's like the Big Bang, and then amoebas grow fins, and fins grow legs, and legs grow fur, and apes become people, and
cause and effect accidents.
And in between somewhere, dinosaurs are running around upside down on a spinning ball. So Yeah, great model.
Okay.
Sorry, I got to get off in all the tangents here all the time.
Well, just we got FPV Angel in the chat. I think still in there. Good to see you in the YouTube chat. And we will be having FPV back on hopefully soon to do a wonderful in-depth Q&A, because I've got questions. A lot of people have questions. So these are the important things to be asking about the nature of the realm, because it opens up a lot. It opens up and makes a lot more sense for us. And I personally want to be psychic and meeting you in a dream state and doing all sorts of fun stuff. And I think to get there, we need to really understand where we are, who we are, and what this is all about better. So, and this, of course, ties into the cellular nutrition too, because if we're not don't have the proper nutrition, we can't activate these higher dimensions, these higher faculties.
Okay, so the previous slide, we were talking with Dr. Schussler about the 12 inorganic elements that are the resonant fields that create the geometry and function in the first place. But they need organic matter to work with. All right. And that organic matter needs the cell salts to coalesce them into proper form and function in the first place. You can't have one without the other. So inorganic and organic elements, you have to have sufficient inorganic elements. They're required for the precipitation of organic matter into proper structure and function. Now, where do you get the organic matter? Well, dietary, sure, you get some there. Digested foodstuffs comprise approximately 30% of the inorganic and organic elements made available to the cells. Now, that's an interesting statement, and I'm pretty convinced that that's the way it works because, well, through a lot of information, through everything from waveform physics to alchemy and so forth. But there's another gentleman whose picture I put up here. His name is Kerry Reams. He's considered the Tesla of botany or biology. And he understood that molecules really aren't where it's at. Molecules are electrical resonant fields. And so he developed ways that I did on every patient for years and years, that I took fluids out of the body, extracted certain elements, put them into a mathematical equation we called the line of resistance, and understood biology from an electrical vector perspective. And then rather than saying, oh, you need more of this food or that food, or don't eat this or that, we would then understand exactly how to tweak the electrical fields with food and then bring that line of resistance into balance. And then you would see all sorts of maladies clear up. And back to the 30% thing there, he also was able to prove out, as I was able to, experience clinically, that all of this stuff is in the atmosphere. And that is, in fact, where we get 70% of our organic matter and inorganic elements. Now, are we saying that there's French fries floating around in outer space? No, we're talking about the fact that our food is just a precipitation of those forces that are already in the atmosphere. And the more adept or refined our body becomes, then it is able to extract more and more of its needs directly from the atmosphere without crudely trying to digest food, which is a waste of energy in the first place. Hey, I like to eat, not saying, anything about that. It's just that you have to know how things work. And most of us eat way too much, which then is one of the greatest interferences in the first place of our body being able to absorb the cell salts. Now, what's in the atmosphere? Well, there's a whole bunch of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the purest form of mineral concentration. It's actually concentrated minerals. Now, that mineral concentration through nitrogen is combined with hydrogen and oxygen. And depending on the proportions that it conjugates with the hydrogen and oxygen, that is the first phase of differentiation of the different minerals, different organic substances and things that the body is able to get directly from the atmosphere. So it all starts in the atmosphere. And that can be very easily demonstrated through biological ionization analysis when you put it to clinical practice. Now, the cell salts that are in the bloodstream or should be in the bloodstream, they are going to convey the final 12 component resonance that is going to take those elements, whether you get them from the diet or directly from the atmosphere, either way, it is going to coalesce them into the function and form, that makes livers look like livers and kidneys look like kidneys and different cells look like different things, create the ecobionts in their different pleomorphic forms and so forth. So there are other, besides the 12 combinations of cell salts, there are other inorganic, we'll call bridge elements that play specialized roles. Obviously, there's a whole periodic table out there. We should be looking at Walter Russell's periodic table that actually goes through 10 octaves and different tonal fields in each octave to really understand the elements. Remind me, I want to say something about that when we get into more of the alchemical principles. But all the elements come into play, but there are 12 basic constellations that are step-down capacitors of the constellations in the firmament of the realm or the top of the toroidal field, or whoever you want to talk about, whatever shape this world is in. And Carrie Reams, I just put a little quote there. We do not live off of the food that we eat. We live off of the energy in the food that we eat. So energy is precipitated into matter. It doesn't go around the way stick, figure science tells us. Energy comes first and matter follows energy. And that's what the science of ionization analysis was about. So let's go back to our original statement. How should doctors be trained? Why wasn't I taught this in medical school, chiropractic college, naturopathic college, and all my postdoctoral stuff? This should be part of a medical school curriculum. Otherwise, you do not have a clue how chemistry creates electricity, or the other way around, actually, and that we have to be looking at resistance levels if we want to adjust the soil, so that things grow, or adjust the bioterrain in our own internal ecology so that we have health and balance. And the reason why this is so important is when you look at the three levels of our being, we always get into that sacred trinity, and there's a lot more we'll talk about here about why it's a trinity. If we do not have these elements, the 12 elements, in sufficient form, we will not be able to create the harmonics that are responsible for creating a cohesive force field that is capable of being a capacitor to house spirit. That's why the original Masonic teachings, before they're infiltrated, all of the scriptures, astrotheology, true astrology, they were always talking about rebuilding the temple because it was all about the body. It's all analogies of the body. That's what the Bible's telling us. It's about our body. And if our body is not in a proper harmonic field, then spirit cannot manifest. And then our own creations on the ground, financial institutions, legal institutions, educational institutions, then they will in fact convey the dissonance of their creators rather than the harmonics that would bring us into an elevated, let's just say, new way of being beyond war, strife, and problem, reaction, solution. Okay, how are we doing, Mike?
Wow, my mind is spinning out on so many different things right now, because what we're talking about, a very important thing is the etheric, right? Or the idea of the medium that connects us all, that scientism has done a great job at basically eviscerating or taking out of the scientific paradigm, thanks to people like Einstein, who seems to, more and more I look into him, to be a complete fraud. But that being said, the fact that the true holistic nature of this realm, that we're all connected through the ether, is so important. And then what does that mean, and how does that work in terms of what is energy, what is consciousness? How does it all relate to our temple? This is the true science and what we always talk about. So seeing it all kind of coming together in ways that's really fascinating in my mind right now. It's hard to wrap my mind around a lot of it, but the harmonics seems so crucial, and sound and how that interplays with consciousness. And my question too about these inorganic elements related to consciousness, are they conscious in terms of how does that tap into the, like, for the law of one and all that? So there's just, yeah, there's a
Well, how
lot of
can
connections
they,
here.
how there's no such thing as a physical precipitation without consciousness, because how does a rock get there in the first place? They just appear? No, there is a real living consciousness that precipitated energy to create that mineral, to create the rock, to create the things that we think are inanimate. Inanimate objects all have consciousness, all have energy. And in my alchemical lab, we will take some of those so-called inert, inorganic elements and bring them back to life. And then we will put them through different cyclic repetitions and elevate. That's how you, by the way, make mineral spagyrics, which are even more powerful, and then elevate the activity of the mineral substances by bringing them back to life and, you know, putting them through the death process and recycling, just like us reincarnating over and over and over again. Each go around with us as conscious creators anyway brings us closer to that point where we get to go up, but we don't have to come down anymore.
So what you're saying almost is you can see a microcosm in the as above, so below idea with working with these minerals in terms of how our biology interfaces with consciousness, how the spirit comes in and out, right?
Yeah, and like our friends Foster Gamble and others who talk about toroidal fields, well, we're talking about toroidal fields, and in one of the next slides, we'll show you a toroidal field and get behind the mechanics of you know, how a toroidal field is created in the first place. So folks, don't get confused by any of this stuff if any of it's new, because our whole objective here is to tell you that the bioterrain is way, way more comprehensive than bugs and, you know, what bugs do or what they don't do. You have to be able to understand the full mechanical electric cycle of the entire continuum so that you can get in on any of these electronic levels and discern if there's dissonance or harmonics, and then you can actually fix things. And that's a long ways away from what medicine hasn't even opened the door yet. I mean, it's so primitive and barbaric that it's beyond comprehension. And I'm not just trying to berate everybody over there. You know, I used to work in emergency services, and hey, it was good stuff, you know, but forget about it if you have to go beyond somebody that's bleeding to death or, you know, needs a broken bone. Hey, I want those guys there, surgeons. They're unbelievable. That was actually my first choice when I went into medicine. I was going to go into orthopedic surgery. And I still kind of, part of me would still like to do that. I love that kind of technology. But as far as understanding how the body works, you got to go there. And what we're doing too here today is not just for doctors, it's so that people can wrap their minds around the fact that they are so much more than what they are led to believe. And that is the one thing that will dispel the fear and set you free.
And looking at this slide, once again, we can see how breatharianism is a potential reality for anybody when you start to understand how the energetic elements interface with our biology through the atmosphere. And then you talk about the informational fields coming through the sun itself and what the sun is and how that relates to, you know, how we precipitate our own functionality through geometry. And it seems like we're starting to break through, Bear. We're starting to break through into the real science here. It's really exciting.
Exactly. So let's go on to the next one. I'm just kind of looking at this again. I did this on the fly, so it's sort of like looking at it for the second time. Okay, elementals. Okay, let's get into the bugs for a little bit. Now, we talked a lot about this in, well, just forever. Andy and Marcy's new terrain movie, I think in part 2 is going to get more into this. And I think I talked a little bit about it in the film. I don't know how much will make the final cuts, but well, let's just read this. Pleomorphism. Internal microbial populations morphologically alter. That just means they change size, shape, and function. And they morphologically alter through predictable cyclic phases to provide the functional support characteristic of each pleomorphic stage. So, okay, you're diagnosed with a staph infection because now you have a diagnosis of, okay, we found a bacterial phase that medicine believes is a separate entity in, you know, in the microbiology out there that, you know, makes us sick, you know, and creates infections. You know, just again, like saying the fly larva killed another deer. So pretty stupid stuff. Now, these microorganisms live inside of us in their seed form. In the original German microbiology that I learned, we called them protids. In Belgium, they called them somatids. I studied with those guys. And so there are different species of those all lying in wait to change, you know, into different forms. This on the side here, you know, we just have the cycles that they all go through. I've looked at that, you know, bunches of times over the years and seen all those forms with my own eyes. So I know it's not a theory. And I was also able to correlate some of those different forms that were prevalent at the blood, in people's blood, with different symptoms. And, you know, we connected the dots. So I get it. Now, some of the different microorganism populations that are always in our bloodstream in seed form are included in the following. I won't go through all this list, but you see that some of them are more specialized in doing work in the lymphatic and respiratory system, cardiovascular. Some regulate what we call bacterial phase conditions. For instance, if we have a condition that is hanging around too long, and for some reason the bacterial forms that are there to do a certain job and are being impeded in completing their mission somehow, then they'll stay around in that advanced stage and sometimes be a little bit of a nuisance themselves. So there are different seed forms that we can use, isopathic preparations that can bring those higher cycles, those valences, we call them, into you know, back into a situation lying in wait, rather than, you know, being inappropriately hung at a certain phase that's giving us symptoms in the first place. And, you know, for instance, we said Staphylococcus, well, that's from the seed organism Penicillium notatum. And you can use these things symptomatically too. When people would have something like strep or staph that are from this seed, we would use injections or suppositories or capsule form of these in order to make that what was diagnosed as an infection go away. And of course, that is why Penicillium notatum in the isopathic form has now been banned by the FDA for being sold in the States right now, because even a lot of MDs were starting to get word that, hey, this stuff really works, and they were starting to use it. So FDA came in and said, hey, you know, the roll up your sleeve is good for you, but we got to get rid of this stuff. So, and some, you know, we see also are good for hanging situations with cell debris that some people call viruses. And that's a thing we, you know, gets into the whole virus debate. But, you know, when there are cell debris mediated conditions that are not going full circle, then penicillium frequentins can be very helpful. Roque 40 is really good for intestinal tract stuff. Candida, the same thing, all oral cavities, you know. You know, and people say, oh my God, I'm diagnosed. The naturopath said I have candida. Well, no, you know what, Sherlock, you know, everybody has candida, parasilosis, albicans, what kind for starters, and then understand that if it is in a fungal higher valence form and giving you symptoms, that's a condition of the ecosystem, and you treat that, and you don't do some kind of stupid anti-candida diet or take antifungals, which the medicals would give you. At least the former has less side effects. But get to the root of the problem. And let's go to part 2 with the elementals.
That I do hear real quick. I do hear a lot of people doing the anti-candida diet. It seems like a big trend right now. We really need to get this education out there.
Well, in all fairness, if you do have a hanging candida fungal situation, not a great idea to be, power eating Snicker bars and everything. You do want to curtail on your sugar and all the things that are going to feed them in the first place. So yeah, great wisdom to that. But realize what you're doing is creating a short-term window of opportunity so that while people are feeling a little better because you're not feeding the beast, take care of the problem at the same time. Meanwhile, I used to see clients, they'd come in, they've been on their anti-candida diet for the last 5 years. Well, if the candida diet worked, you wouldn't have to do it anymore. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's a candida rant. Part 2. Okay, we already made the original statement. New German medicine, Dr. Hammer contributed greatly to the whole understanding of ecobionts as far as their role in biology. And what he was able to do, besides just connecting the whole neurological, embryological, psychological, circle, but he was also able to identify that when one of the 3 germ levels, all the tissues of the body are made out of 1 or 3 germ levels, one of the 3 germ levels. And he found that when certain germ levels were involved, let's just say endoderm tissue involved in one of the glands is having a problem, then he knew that, and there's also a part of the brain involved, we won't go into all that, but he knew that then that would be a certain stage of the pleomorphic cycle. Now, he didn't talk about the pleomorphic cycle. This is my own doc connection. So, I learned from the 2 primary schools and in New German medicine, and they get a little bit militant about all you have to do is identify the psychological conflict. Well, okay. Now you have an ulceration or a tumor or something that's part of the biological expression of something going on in psychology, and you're deficient in one of the cell salts, or you don't have the, one of the microbe populations that needs to go digest the tumor after the biological expression is over. Well, guess what? You're going to have a hell of a time. And I found out this personally, not because I did lousy New German medicine, but because in a clinical practice, when you see thousands of people, you realize you have to have a full arsenal of tools, understand how they all connect together. That's where, proper medical training comes in. And what we'd have to do is sometimes make sure that the cells had all the materials they needed in order to repair themselves to go full circle so that you didn't have a tumor that's hanging around growing forever. And also make sure that maybe if the person, had frequent antibiotic use and was killing all these microorganisms in the first place, you might have to supply some more in seed form, rebuild the ecosystem so that these guys were available to secrete the enzymes and so forth that they need, the cell salts to do in the first place, and digest the tumor so you can get on with your life. All these things have a place, and you have to understand the full spectrum of the bioterrain.
Can I say one thing too here, Barrett? The purest Germanic New Medicine, or you say New German Medicine, whatever the heck, I know that even gets contentious, but they would say you could almost live in a bubble without any interaction with your environment and just relate to your psyche. But it seems very obvious that we are on this plane to interact with our environment, with Mother Gaia, with the elementals, with all this. It's all holistic in nature. So we have to have that engagement to be fully thriving, healthy beings. And you see it even in the studies of the breatharians, where they took them into a clinical setting, in a hospital setting, and they started to falter in their ability to maintain homeostasis, where when they were in a cave somewhere, even they were at least out in the elements, they were in nature, they were connecting with the elements, they were connecting with the terrain of the greater terrain, right? As above, so below, the terrain of this system we're in, this biological system. So I agree. It obviously seems to be that nature plays a major role, and we can't just be in a bubble boy depending on our psyche, right?
Well, that's the Luciferian influence, which is one incarnation in Asia, which is why Asia really went wholesale into leave your body experiences, but couldn't manifest anything on the ground. And we're not saying Lucifer is some kind of devil, but it was an influence on this planet that made it very hard for people to ground into, complete the ascension process in the first place. Now we have the Ahriman influence that is bringing us into stick figure science and trying to keep us into, the mechanical state of mind, which in Chinese medicine, we call it the co-cycle, which is just pure destruction with, no mana to put the pieces back together to elevate it, into the center part of the two polarities, between Lucifer and Ahriman, which is the Christ consciousness. And of course, we had somebody embody that portrayed that and lived that for us and created a living resonance in the atmosphere, which was in fact a resonance that gave humanity a second chance, the New Testament, to save our asses from where we're headed in the first place. Okay, so maybe I should read this since I wrote something here. Okay, brainstem activation of biological program requires fungi, mycobacteria for recycling. Okay, now let's forget that. The last part is good. Cerebral cortex, which is the higher brain, which when we get into the resonant fields of the 12 builders, that's going to get into calliphosphoricum, which is the Aries, the springtime, the beginning of the whole 12-point cycle and the seasons. It also correlates with the 12 meridians. Down here, I think I put 12 meridian mediation of internal phase organ clock with the macro solar constellation cycle. So that's with the micro, is within us, and or what the meridians are, is their job is to create a homeostasis with our external environment, and exactly what you were talking about, Mike, when that is harmonious. And if we are balanced, then we will be communicating, resonating with our outer ecosystem. And that has to happen if we are to have health. Now, there's other meridians inside the organs themselves. Dr. Kareem's done an amazing job finding the biosignatures, which are the internal energy pathways of every single, tissue in the body. That's another whole science that, should be taught to medical people.
How does this relate to the autonomic physiology, the vagal system, and the kind of the unconscious biocomputer aspect of us that is running? You said
you said the key word, unconscious. Mm-hmm. And so does that mean that because science has differentiated the nervous system into the conscious and unconscious, automatic, so-called nervous system, it just goes without any of our conscious direction? Do we really, really believe that, that's the creator's design, as it were half unconscious? No. Wim Hof proved out that if you do certain things, you become fully in control of those so-called autonomic functions. Yogis in the Far East could control their heart rate, their blood pressure, and all sorts of things, by going into a different state of consciousness. I used to work with athletes, and we would take world-class athletes, put them on heart monitors. We'd find their autonomic functions by way of blood pressure, heart rate and everything, get them conscious of that, and then train them incrementally so they got to a point where their physiology that would be balls to the wall, sympathetic nervous system tax, just hitting the wall, we would train them so that with more conscious awareness and physical training, they could then stay in a parasympathetic state while they were, at a point that used to make them hit the wall. So when they're in the last lap or the fourth quarter or whatever, they still had afterburners left, whereas normally they would have otherwise been running out of gas. Does any of that make sense? So no, there's no such thing as autonomic. It's just unconscious, and we're supposed to be conscious of anything. And if the physical body was not important, we wouldn't have one in the first place. And that is why all the sacred sciences of old talked about rebuilding the temples so that we could manifest heaven on earth. And there's no other way to do it. What were you putting up on screen there?
I was putting up, I didn't mean to put it up on screen, but this polyvagal theory, which was brought to my attention lately, which just has to do with what we were just talking about there in terms of the fight or flight, the sympathetic and the asympathetic, or it's an interesting theory about the vagus wave, the vagus nerve system, and how our systems are doing a lot of things we're not aware of, and how it freezes us. And I don't know. I think it's interesting, but I also believe that is just playing out those patterns with when we become more aware of it and we can control it, and then we can overcome any of this kind of stuff that we think we're powerless to control. So, but it is,
and as a physician, you're talking about the vagus nerve. Well, that's 10th cranial nerve, and that, creates a lot of functions, or controls a lot of functions in our body. Now, what if we don't have the proper brain chemistry? We're short of calcium phosphoricum, for instance. Now we're not going to have the proper electrical arcs going back and forth between the male-female components of the upper brain centers, which is the pineal male, pituitary female. And so you aren't going to have the electrical conductivity going through the third ventricle that is then going to go through the next phase of our embryological or spiritual evolution, which goes down to Taurus and then goes through some of those nerves, such as the vagus, into that second resonant field, that is portrayed analogously as Taurus, which then, activates the 12 constellations, or the ganglia within our solar system, that then in turn make all the organs do proper things. So, and then what if a physician was really clever and knew how to manipulate the cranial sacral feel the rhythm and create, balance and proper circulation of the cerebral spinal fluid with hands-on techniques, and be able to feel the rhythm in all the organs as well as the spinal and the cranial system, and help facilitate that flow, spread the proper electrical conduction. Okay, now you're talking about real doctoring, that's going to support all the understanding of the electronic levels and the chemistry and everything that follows.
Yeah. Wow. Can we, I'm going to take that clip out of this AlphaCast and just put that up as its own clip, because I need to listen to that about 10 times. So anyways, oh my goodness. Okay. Where are we at here?
Let's move on. I guess, we already did these. Oh, well, let's,
next one.
What did I say? 12 and mediation of the internal time clock. Okay, yeah, we did all that. That's good. Yeah. The biological psyche interface. This gets more into New German medicine. I think we beat that up enough, where basically we're understanding that we all have different traumas that affect our psyche. Now, in the true schematic of New German medicine, basically, we're talking about instinctual survival interpreted via societal interactions. That means, maybe if you're out in a wolf pack or something and, you're triggered in a survival thing, you're going to react a certain way. Well, embryologically, we have all those animal kingdoms hardwired into us. So the first statement that I should have read, mankind's evolutionary advantage to transition beyond instinctual reactions to consciously rational behaviors. Now, this isn't something Dr. Hammer said, I don't think, but that's just my take on it. Take it or leave it. And so this mechanism allows a couple things to happen. biology can then, grow things, erode things, create reactions, biological expressions of that instinctual trigger. And therefore, biology can express where a lot of things that we might be totally unaware of. And why would it do that? Well, number one, as we already said, it's going to allow us to let off the steam, the pressure that those events create in a real level of physics, so that we aren't damaging tissues, which is what that pressure buildup will be. It'll also keep us in very inappropriate, lower animalistic reactionary states. Okay. So it's a good thing to entrain ourselves out of those behaviors. They're not, really productive in the long run. And so again, the problem is that when these triggers happen and we have a biological expression, then of course they're diagnosed as diseased, which creates secondary traumas to the psyche just for the sake of some, high priest saying you're going to die in 2 weeks. And which, people typically do if we're given that kind of message. And, but, this is an amazing advancement in the science of medicine, in that he made the connection between the psyche, biology, embryological unfoldment, and showing that biology mimics or holographically expresses conflicts, pressures building up in the psyche. He was able to demonstrate this on CAT scans where the original trigger in the brain was, and then they go away after the cycle is broken up. So what else do we have? It relieves emotional pressure and consequent toxic metabolism and organ damage. It breaks cyclic long-term repetitions of non-productive behaviors. And it gets a little more complicated. Here's where I get off into the weeds a little bit different than, the real purist in New German medicine. In my experience, there's not just these biological triggers that are the product of an unanticipated intense event, but there are carryovers from different go-arounds of the karmic cycles, we'll say. And this gets largely into an understanding of things like the Enneagram. For instance, the Enneagram is a mathematical expression you can understand by studying vortex mathematics, of how the Enneagram, which was a Sufi system brought over by Gurdjieff, it's a 9-point star. But then when you look at the 3 basic sectors, electrically, it conforms to what Walter Russell would talk about as far as a pendulum with a particular fulcrum that the pendulum swings back and forth. And depending on your energetic predispositions that have been put in play by you in previous times that you carry, from lifetime to lifetime, you're going to have a particular energetic persuasion that is going to make you react in a unique way compared to somebody else who has a little bit of a different energetic rub based on different pressure differentials. So now we're talking about biological expression in New German medicine. I found that you really had to incorporate an understanding, which is why I was a practitioner of Enneagrams, to understand what a person's particular predisposition is in the first place. And then that helped me work with the person on the level of the psychological conflict that we talk about in New German medicine, so that I could really get to the bottom of it, or help them get to the bottom of it a lot quicker. There's another thing that happens, which are acquired stress patterns. Stuff happens all the time. We're getting triggered right and left. And then it might be not worthy of, maybe what we would call one of these insults, that we isolate in New German medicine. But in biological ionization analysis, I could do that electrical, equation. Then I could also riff mathematically off of that and create a sequence of numbers. And each of those numbers would correlate with different organ systems, and not only show me where pressure had built up in different organ systems, but when in their life. And we'd get it almost to the month, definitely to the year in their life. And, as we're breaking these sequences down, people say, how the hell did you know about that? but it was all in there in the math, in the electricity. And then there's a way to sequentially go after these things. And each of these numbers would also tell me which organs are being affected. So stress patterns are more acquired, emotional based things that I would take a lot of time to go after to dissipate some of those pressures, along with understanding their original predisposition in the first place. And then I had more of a fighting chance of bringing people's awareness to what the new German medicine folks were talking about. And so if you can't get rid of those emotional conflicts, so then you have what in new German medicine we call a hanging conflict. And of course, you're not going to have a full circle biological healing back to normal tissue function unless the 12 cell salts are available, because those are the building blocks that the cells use. And just like, a tradesman on the ground, if you don't have the materials to fix the pipes or whatever, you're out of luck. You got to have them. And okay. And then we already talked about, you got to have the microbes there too, that are going to be taking part of that. And so got to put the pieces together, folks.
So a lot of times I hear people talking about negative emotions causing disease. But isn't that just another subjective kind of view of what this is in terms of what the conflict is? How do we get around that? Like, how do we even know something could be negative to someone isn't a negative to another person? So are we just talking about emotions here and how you deal with them versus quantifying what is negative and what's positive?
Well, let's talk about any physical element. Our bodies are a composite of physical elements. All we're talking about is not physical. We're talking about motion. And the characteristics of all the waveforms that, create that composite of motion is going to, create what you look like and everything about you and the circumstances of your entire life. That's motion. All there is motion. There's one substance, there's one consciousness that creates varying degrees and combinations of motions, and that's the whole simulation. Emotion is the same motion with a loss of energy. That's it. Simple. So if you have put things in motion that are inharmonious, we'll say, or not in alignment with universal principles and understanding and wisdom, then you're going to have emotion. You're going to have a loss of energy. And I think at the beginning of our talk, we're talking about the human temple, the biological temple, being a capacitor that is supposed to receive and store energy. And the name of the game is having a net gain of energy all the time. Then you have health. Then you can get on with your spiritual life and everything else, and you can see through all the bullshit that's going on the planet right now. So that's why we play the game. We've got a feedback mechanism, our physical temple, that allows us to enter into the simulation and also talks to us every single minute and tells us how we're doing. Sometimes it does that through symptoms. Those symptoms, bottom line, are deficiencies, not disease, not germs. And when those deficiencies are met, the temple is allowed to rebuild itself into a cohesive whole, receive the harmonics of spirit, and, as we already said, create beauty and perfection.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. As you say, this quote here from Joseph Scagna, am I saying that right? Every emotion, every ailment has a complex logarithmic statement.
Joseph Scagna was a very interesting guy. And somebody I studied early on. He's pretty tapped in a whole different way. And his work that he did with infrared measuring and things, which I did myself until I found ways to extrapolate it from chemistry. He's the one that was able to figure out the what we call the stress patterns, and be able to find out what organ involvements, how many there were that were existing when they occurred, and how to relieve that stress. And I, kind of followed suit with him and was able to talk people through these stress patterns sequentially, relieve the pressure, and really help people get on with things.
Mm-hmm. Next slide.
Sure. Okay, remember, folks, we're still talking about the bioterrain, but let's just go back to New German medicine. Okay, they're great in making all those connections and seeing how biology will react to emotion. Well, how the heck does the message get from, that electronic level we call emotion or astral and trigger something in a physical part of the brain? We left that part out. Well, when you understand the ether and how the ether is the medium that allows waveforms from consciousness to travel from point A to point B, try going out in your surfboard and catching a wave when there's no water. Same thing, you got to have ether. And that's why they took ether out of the equation, so they could come up with all these insane theories about black holes and space and, looking at squiggly lines they call waves in physics books without any discourse as far as how the heck those waveforms travel in the first place. They had to get rid of the ether, and it was very premeditated. Okay, so matter is motion conducted across the ether. Now, in classic, we're going back to old school terminology, which I just use for the fun of it. We can put this in more contemporary jargon. Ether has 4 basic levels: heat, light, chemistry, and life. Chemistry, I have slash numbers because that gets into resonance that we can then measure. There's a wonderful chiropractor back in the early 1900s. Her name was Ruth Down, and she created a radio vision where she was able to take the resonance from the electronics of your being. You just put your feet on some foot plates, and then that would be conducted through photography equipment, and then it would create not only frequencies that you could then, that she was able later to put together as far as a taxonomy of symptoms, and understand that certain frequencies were aberrant to normal health and what in fact created what we would otherwise diagnose as disease. But it created a perfect, clear picture that would have made CAT scans, MRIs, and X-rays totally obsolete a long time ago. And of course, just like Reich and everybody else, they persecuted the poor lady to death, literally. And so, yeah, there's so many things that, by the way, behind the scenes, some of us have been using this stuff. It's all been hidden. You mentioned Einstein. He was one of the instrumental characters in burying Wilhelm Reich stuff, because Reich brought his stuff to him. And then anyway, another story. Okay, so let's put ether, the 4 levels, into more of a Walter Russell kind of understanding. And heat is generated by electricity. And electricity is created by thought. So if you go down to the toroidal field there, you see thought. So, and then, that thought becomes light. And, through polarization and so forth. And I'm missing a lot of steps in there, but I'm just trying to conform the toroidal, understanding with the old ether explanation. So you go thought, polarization, etheric matter. So this is the polarization of electricity on the etheric canvas. And when they say the 4 levels of ether, actually, I think it should be say the 4 levels of electrical activity upon the ether. But of course, the ether, being a living consciousness, is the only thing that could conduct that and be amenable to those polarizations manifesting in the first place. So the toroidal field is two simultaneous cycles. You have thought and the polarization and all the different step downs that we talk about in Russellian physics that then create a centripetal motion, a compression of those informational fields, we could call them, into matter. And it requires a coldness that is created by, we'll call the yin forces. You know, we go back to Chinese medicine again. And those yin forces would allow those informational fields spinning in a certain direction to kind of spin down into a cone and compress into something that now we can see with our five physical senses. Now we're in we're in business in the simulation. We've got real feedback. But simultaneously, as that, we get into the final point of physical matter, that creates heat with that fast spin, which now disperses simultaneously the compressed informational field. So you have a simultaneous radiation of that matter spreading out in the opposite direction. And if you're really on top of your game, it's now getting refreshed by those universal harmonics that we should be operating on, and to recompress into matter and experiences that we'd all like to see on the ground, or otherwise compress into garbage, which is, we see a lot of that these days. And the toroidal field, if you look at the picture to the right and just look at those spiraling cones pointed at each other, if you can imagine those involuting in one direction, coming around the bottom and, coming around the, circling back around the circumference, and then, going back down through the middle and just going over and over and over again. That's what people are talking about with toroidal fields. Every cell in your body is a toroidal field. Our body is a large toroidal field, in different levels of radiation. One of the first things I like to do is look at the composite of that and see if that toroidal field is skewed in the east to west axis or north to south axis. That tells me a lot about, the energy, either loss or the conservation of energy, or how that's playing out as far as glandular conditions, emotional conditions, and all sorts of good things. And then when you go back to the ionization analysis, I do my vectors, through chemistry. It's going to tell me the same exact thing through chemistry as far as if the electricity is, going out in one of those quadrants or not. And that tells you a lot medically about what that body's doing. Walter Russell, went into further geometry, where he took the two primary geometric shapes, the cube and the circle, and taught how those electrical polarizations then go through the six phases, or the six sides, bend around the six sides of the cube to create, spherical waveforms. And then you interject XYZ, axis of consciousness in there. You have the 3 times 3 all over again. We're going to talk about that in a little bit when we now interject the ether toroidal field concepts on alchemical concepts. And I want to keep reminding, even though this probably sounded like gobbledygook to a lot of people, and remember, we're going to break all this down in a separate podcast so we can draw more easy analogies and things. This is all everything to do with the bioterrain, because this is how the bioterrain got here in the first place. It's how we understand our responsibility in our role in maintaining our own bioterrain and creating the world we want to live in, including a healthy body in the first place. So if anybody can just take anything away from this today, it's you're a lot more grander than you realize, and you're not subjected to disease and to pathogens, and you don't even have to understand any of this on a technical level. Get the big picture, and at least you'll be brought out of victim consciousness that brings you into fear, that creates all of our problems and the manipulations that they're doing on a population in the first place.
Yeah, and a great analogy would be breath. You compress in and you radiate out. And you do that however often you breathe. And that is like a great microcosm for creation right there and how it all works.
Yeah, you think?
Okay, next slide.
Okay, the 12 qualifiers. Now we talked about the toroidal fields and how those are created electrical vectors from our own thought and the creator's thought that creates the larger canvas and the whole bit. But now we have those constellations up in the sky. What the heck are they doing? Well, they're beaming down different resonant fields that hit the capacitors on the ground, which are the 12 inorganic cell salts that then are the builders of our body. And there I have them correlated with the astrological signs. And if you go from Aries, which is spring, that goes all the way to Pisces, which is the precursor to spring in March, before we get into April, you'll see every cell salt correlated with that particular resonance of that constellation. And that will allow us to understand the embryological unfoldment of our being on the spiritual level, as well as how it all works together in our biological selves. And I also put next to each of the signs in the cell salts, just a real quick one-liner about the kind of activity that regulates within the physical body. And to the right there is a wheel, a 12 spectrum wheel, the same thing we, with radiesthesia measure when I'm looking at herbal formulas or things I'm concocting in the lab. Also using some technology like the spectrograph and things like that. Then I can see the color spectrums, measure them radiologically or radiesthesia. How do you say that? With radiesthesia. And, understand, which component or resonance that you're working with, and then find compatible combinations and do kind of fun stuff. So, or discern in the physical body which levels of resonance are aberrant or not operating at all. So now what we're going to do is try to correlate these to physical symptoms so we can start to implant seeds in people's minds when they ask the question, well, what are people dying of if they aren't dying from the bug? Or, why is this symptom happening if it's not from a germ? How can the lack of any of these salts cause symptoms in the first place? Well, let's talk about that. That's your cue, Mike. Next slide. Are you? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go. Okay. Okay, we could, this would be a great few ones because now we have the 4 elements. If you break down the astrological wheel, you'll have 3 crosses. And in astrology, now this is, I'm not getting into the internal mechanics of somebody's birth chart. What we're talking about more on the macro level, so I don't want to be attacked by astrologers here. But when you look at, the different elements around the 12 points of that sphere we were just looking at, the different resonant fields, you're going to find 3 crosses. Those crosses have great significance, as any astrologer knows. And you have the cardinal cross, the fixed cross, the mutable cross. We won't go into all those sorts of things. But when you look at how these 4 elements in those crosses each encompass the 4 elements, which are fire, air, water, and earth. And in alchemy, we talk about the fixed elements and the volatile elements. The volatile elements are the fire and the air. And the fixed elements are the water and the earth, kind of the stuff where the rubber meets the road. Now, in alchemy, we talk about how different combinations will create the Trinity, or the 3 aspects of our being. The soul, which is our individualized consciousness. The spirit, which we could maybe relate to prana or the ether, the all-pervasive universal intelligence. And then the body, the thing we're talking about, our physical temple. So how did the 4 elements come together to create the 3? Again, the sacred Trinity. Well, we've got, when you put the 2 volatile ones together, fire, and air. And if you look at the different combinations I have below, you can see how those 3 crosses in the zodiac in the sphere, when you combine the different elements or the different resonant fields as depicted by the astrological constellations, you'll see in Soul, for instance, in the cardinal cross, you'll have Aries, the fire element, combining with Libra, the air element, to create the soul for that cardinal cross configuration. The spirit is created by combining the air and the water, which in this case is Libra and Cancer, which creates the spirit element for that particular cross. The body is created by the water and the earth elements, and in this case, the Cancer resonance with Capricorn resonance, and those associated soul salts. And now you have soul, spirit, body, 3 times 3, and the 4 becomes 3, and there's a lot of significance that this is going to require a lot of breaking down. I haven't seen the soul salts approach from this perspective, but I've got a lot of stuff I think I can share on this. We'll go into, but the main thing for this presentation to take away is how 4 elements are then through alchemy, alchemical understanding, reconfigured into the 3 components of all of life, including ourselves. And when you understand those 4 elements, how they work in the body, how they work with the builders, the physical cell salts, and then depending on any resonant predisposition we have by way of our birth, now we can use those 12 builders in some pretty clever ways. But let's make it a little easier with the next slide. How are we doing, Mike? Are we off into it so much or too much? Or
no, this has been an absolutely fantastic overview. The chat's going great, and it's I gotta admit, even for me, my brain's about full. So I think we're coming up towards the end here. This is gonna be one. This is gonna be one we're gonna be watching. I'm gonna be watching a few times because this is really amazing information. People are loving it. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's wind it down. We can do that real quick. Let's just take one example. I'd like to give you a whole bunch of examples, but let's just say, oh my God, I went down to the tropics, I got malaria. Of course, back to germ theory, right? Well, there's one cell salt, which is sodium sulfate, not sulf, that is responsible for regulation of water. Now, what happens when you're in a tropical area and maybe you go there and you're not used to the tropics, especially? Well, you're going to an area where there's a great abundance of moisture in the air. Now, as you breathe that in, that is going to create a lot more moisture in your bloodstream. Now, when there's too much moisture in the bloodstream, nat sulf, natrium sulfuricum, is supposed to take the excess moisture out. If you are deficient in natrium sulfuricum, what's going to happen is your body is going to start convulsing like shivers. And what it's trying to do is mechanically shiver the water out. And how do we prove that? Well, what happens after, when you're in the throes of a fever and you're shivering, and then you kind of come out the other end, you start sweating, right? You break a sweat. And then they say, oh, you broke the fever. No, your body just succeeded in getting rid of the excess moisture until it builds up again. Then you go through another fever, which is why malaria, so-called, goes through cyclic stages and it comes and goes. Now, another thing that happens when you've got too much moisture in there and maybe you don't have enough nat sulf, your pulse is going to speed up because it's trying to get more oxygen to the tissues under the circumstances. And let's just say at the same time, you're short of ferrum phosphoricum, which is how the element you need in your blood to carry the oxygen in the first place. So now if you have a shortage of that, your pulse is going to speed up even more. And that is going to create more and more heat in your body. And according to the laws of the conservation of energy, that heat is going to manifest a fever to throw off that heat. But of course, even in natural medicine, we say, oh, no, the bugs are good because it creates a fever to kill the bad guys. No, fevers are not there to kill the bad guys. I used to believe that even when I was in naturopathic school. So instead, if you really understand what's going on, you're going to make sure that the person has enough nat sulf, enough ferrum phosphoricum, and you're going to be able to get the oxygen to the blood cells more efficiently. You're going to be able to get rid of the abundance of nature of moisture, and the body is not going to have to go through those convulsions and intermittent fevers and all the things that we say, oh, I got malaria. And another proof of the pudding is a lot of folks that contract malaria in the tropics, then they go, back home to a nice dry, cooler climate, with less moisture in the air, and wow, they feel a lot better. So that's just one example where you can kind of kill another microbe-induced theory and bring it back to what really creates symptoms, which is the deficiency of one or more of the cell salts. And if you want to really understand how each of the cell salts works physiologically, you can get doctors that are trained at more in-depth levels of this, and you'll get 10 doctors and they'll come up with the same diagnosis every single time. Now try that with regular doctors when you get a patient with a certain condition or diagnosis. Everybody's all over the map with everything. That's why you need second opinions. If you understand biochemic medicine, you don't need second opinions because everybody's going to come to the same simple conclusion. And you don't have to live in fear that you got a microbe or there's anything to get over with in the first place. Give the cells what they need and they'll fix everything. That's what they're designed to do. It might not happen overnight, and you might have to, be a little bit more clever with bioterrain medicine and provide some of the other needs. And that's where everything else comes in. And we can talk a lot more about that at another time. But if you don't have the 12 builders, I don't care what you do, you're not even going to get off the ground. So number two, after supply, you want to cleanse. And, face it, we live on a poison planet. So simple things. I know there's way more complicated things out there. Distilled water, because it's in a higher energetic state. It's alchemically elevated water. It's able to transport minerals and the cell salts more efficiently across the cells. It's superior for its cleansing. You want to sometimes do irrigation. Sometimes you got to go in there and rotor-rooter out the pipes. So colonics, low bowel enemas for targeted action, such as coffee enemas, which are going to allow the liver to purge and, so you have a cleaner system, just like changing the oil filter on your car. You're going to do a lot better. Chelation, just putting in specialized elements from algae concentrate, cilantro, micronized zeolite. They're going to help, grab onto some of those things, get rid of them so that your cells have less work to do while they're rebuilding with the cell salts. Daily exercise, absolutely essential. Mitigate, number three. So
can I say one thing about chelation with the zeolite conspiracy going on around now, right? We've seen it on Telegram, and I think even
I haven't heard that one.
A couple people asking for refunds on our 0.0 zeolite, thinking
seriously.
Yeah, you didn't see. We got one request last week. They're sharing this video going around talking about how it's adding more heavy metal toxicity, and this comes up like every 6 months to a year, comes around about zeolite, and how we explain once again how our delivery system and the humic fulvic with the transitional elements and et cetera is completely different animal than something that's not micronized or something that's cheap zeolite. So make sure you're getting your chelation products from highly value, really good organic sources, bioavailable. Don't just buy the cheap stuff on Amazon. Come to someone like us or someone that we.
So zeolite and algae both have a propensity for picking up heavy metals and stuff, and that's where the theories come from. Now you can go into microalgae. There's stuff going on for the last 30 years. I've been hearing about it. Oh, you don't want to have blue-green algae because it picks up all the junk. Well, if you're harvesting from the right part of the lake, and if you test every single batch to make sure there is nothing in it, now you've got, safe, authenticated, third-party tested algae, and you're okay. If you're getting zeolite that has been micronized so it works better, and also purified and tested to make sure it doesn't have contaminants in it, and it's mined from areas that are more appropriate and going to be more amenable for being toxic free. Now you have a zeolite molecule that is empty, doesn't have any garbage with it, that's going to carry to your body, and it is going to be able to grab the stuff in your own body and get it out of there. So whatever, give them their money back. I get so tired of that.
And daily exercise, of course, for me, God, when I'm starting to feel a little down, I feel like we haven't totally gotten into the whole idea of chi and that energetic flow from like Chinese medicine or, but I feel like I'm getting stagnant on that. And that's probably related to moving these cell salts around and also related to the glandular system and getting that moving again. But when I go for a run or I go for a workout, man, sometimes those symptoms reverse quite rapidly.
Completely. And also you're speeding up your elimination system as well. Okay, so mitigate, the last one, we'll wrap it up. Microwave neutralization. And with the 57 rollout yesterday, that's going to be a huge thing. So stuff everybody already knows how to do, turn off your stuff, disconnect your modem, hardwire stuff, just, minimize as much as possible. For our urban brothers, it's going to be a little bit tougher because you're swimming in the sea of it, but there are a lot of things you can do. You can do orgone technologies. You can do biogeometry. You can do all sorts of things to create the environment you want, even though you're surrounded by the stuff. And and then at the same time, turn that stuff off. You don't have to be walking around on your cell phone all the time. I mean, you look like an idiot anyway when you're doing that. So, just learn how to communicate without it. And there was a time where a lot
screens, people get off your screens. Like it's becoming second nature. People, when they have a second to their self, they want to go to their screen. Like, put it away from you and go into your imagination, go into thinking about stuff, for heaven's sakes.
And understand that little screen is not made for your convenience. It is part of the new fifth dimensional warfare model, which is to track everywhere you go, and also to have your own little personal cell tower with you so they can modify your biology and your behavior in any way that they want. And where they're leading us is just exactly the way China is already, is that you will be required by the legal system to have that on and with you all the time. It's no different than the little tag you see on the ear of cattle when you're driving out in the countryside. So when you're walking around with that thing to your ear, just get that little image of the cattle with the tag on the ear. That's what you look like.
Yeah. Listen to us on your device and then turn it off.
Okay, I'm sabotaging ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. I'm talked out.
We're gonna start pressing the podcast to vinyl, I think. And how cool would that be, man? We're on season 4 of our podcast, by the way. Or not really like official. We never even say what like number this is or whatever. But yeah, how cool would that be to start pressing AlphaCast to vinyl?
With the vinyl, that's what allowed us to play Paul is Dead backwards in the first place. We got on our phonographs and we're spinning it backwards, and great stuff.
Hey, that's the end. What do you know?
Yeah.
We came
12
to the
slides.
end, guys. Yeah, 12. Oh,
Didn't
really?
even plan
12.
it that way.
Wow. You did plan it that way without even knowing. Oh, that's great. Well, we will have the slides on a download for you for people that were having problems seeing it, and we will have that in the show notes below. So we were almost going 2.5 hours with this one, but that's okay. This was like really, really amazing information, Bear. My brain is saturated, so I can only imagine what some people that are new to this are thinking, but this was amazing. And I would love to now start cherry picking some of these ideas and then creating them into further podcasts, because like I brought up chi, and we bring up the idea of the universal laws of vibration and resonance and all this stuff, and how that relates to with the cell salts and our consciousness. I mean, there's so much here. And then of course we tie that into the esoteric and into all the symbology and the code inherent in everything. And this taps into so much stuff. Wow. So amazing.
In a half hour, that was probably me trying to figure out screen sharing.
No, that wasn't too bad. And we won't cut it. We don't even edit our podcast ever, so people get to enjoy that aspect. But hey, man, any parting words now for this, for our community? And I got to get back to homeschooling these kids, but anything to sum up here?
No, I think I'm talked out. And thanks for everybody that, was willing to sit through that. And again, get the big picture takeaway. Don't get lost, with the trees there, and understand that bioterrain, as we've been led into the debate, is about germ versus non-germ. And that is not what bioterrain is about. And to understand the bioterrain, you have to understand everything from alchemy, physics, waveform mechanics, biology, the orgone, ether, and until we really understand how we work, then we're really going to have a hard time just being healthy and happy in the first place. And by the way, all this information that we'll break down for you further in the future, it's way easier to learn and understand than all the other trash. And you could do it in a matter of weeks compared to going through medical school for years and coming out and just being an idiot in the first place.
You can do it with the third grade education, really. So,
yep.
yeah. And guys, so we'll go into these topics more and more this year. I'm very excited to dive deeper. I mean, this is all the stuff that's been occulted, the mystery schools and all these secret organizations. This is all the true knowledge that they are aware of. Understanding how the temple really works. And this is why they don't go to allopathy and why they, why they've been hiding all this stuff, because this is what's going to free us. So
that's why I used to see a lot of those characters in my office.
Exactly. Well, hey, this has been amazing, Bear. What a treat. Once again, guys, give us a thumbs up, a share with your friends and family. Let's get this information out there. We love you guys so much. Next week, we have a very special broadcast with Stephen Wybrow and Errol from coming to you live from Austria, as they're taking on the head of the snake. They've cut the head of the snake off, or they've got we actually had to reschedule Jim Gale, who was going to be on, and he was totally cool with it because of this emergency broadcast. And you guys know what's going on in Austria. It's getting dire over there, but they've got some great stuff to share.
Happy to hear they're coming on, and I'm also equally as excited to see Jim Gale here, because we've got a lot in common. So that's going to be a great episode too. So a lot to look forward to. And then we have another interesting one. Do you want to drop the name, or we'll probably trigger a lot of people?
We're going to be triggering a lot of people, and I will be coming in a bit as the devil's advocate. I want to take lots of questions because David is the man at answering them. David Weiss will be on the AlphaCast finally to go deep into his model of what the reality construct is. That's going to be a fun one. He's a fun guy, and he's very knowledgeable, and I will have a great conversation.
Cool. Okay, Michael, that was awesome.
Okay, guys, you guys enjoy the rest of your day, your weekend, wherever you are. Get outside, get your feet in the soil, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, or sunshine, wherever you are. Mother Nature is the greatest teacher. We love you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.